This is Risky Business, the podcast for environmental risk and property due diligence professionals to stay up to date with industry news, the best information, and the best tools.
Hi, and welcome to Risky Business, the environmental risk and due diligence podcast. I'm Dave Colonna, Director of Lender Solutions at ERIS, and I'm pleased to be your host for today's episode. Today, we're talking about a really exciting topic, AI, and how environmental risk departments can start to think about deploying it and using it. We're really fortunate to have Jim King with us today. He's the environmental risk manager at Fifth Third Bank. Jim, thanks so much for joining me.
Dave, I'm a big fan of this podcast, and I'm honored to be invited on, so thank you.
Awesome. So I thought we'd start with maybe just a couple stats. About 92% of banks worldwide are using AI in some capacity. Not too big of a surprise there. If we look at U.S. banks, actually about 98% are using it. So again, most banks are using AI in some regard. Most of it's, fraud related, customer service, some credit related decision making. But again, at the end of the day, most banks are using it in some capacity. If we look at a recent survey of about 400 banks, only about 11% are actually using generative AI. So again, that's decisioning, learning, obviously a little bit different than just your typical spell check, right? If we kind of break that down even a little bit further, there's no real data on this, but my guess is that if we look at environmental risk departments at banks, it's low, 1, maybe 2% of environmental risk departments are actually using it. But you guys are in that category. So I'd love to hear about sort of your journey and the whole entire process. When did you guys get started looking at AI and starting to use it?
Yeah, so Dave, we've been working on this topic for probably over 10 years now. But I kind of look at our journey as pre-ChatGPT 3 and post. Before 2022, we looked at building models that could assist us in classifying reports or pulling data from reports, running analytics on the data that we collected in our in UConnect, which is our appraisal environmental management system. But in retrospect, what we were thinking about then was quite limited, and the value of those projects, any projects we would have done, may have been positive, but probably limited. And then in the fall of 2022, almost 3 years ago to the day, ChatGPT 3 came out, and I was aware of those capabilities that they would arrive at some point. But I was surprised by the timing. My assumption, which is really based on predictions of people who are smarter than me about these things, was that kind of capability was 5, if not 10 years off. But there it was. And so what that meant for our group is that we stopped thinking about building models from scratch that could pull data from environmental assessments and maybe generate a risk score or other kind of automated features like that. It was clear that generative AI was going to swamp all of those avenues for AI. And really since 2023, we've been focused on how to use generative AI to manage environmental risk, where it works, how best to extract value from it, and of course, what pitfalls to avoid. And I'd say as a group, we're better for having used it, but we're still learning.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an evolving technology. What specific tasks are you guys having it perform now? You mentioned writing and review. Can you get into just some specifics of how you guys are using it?
Let me say what we're not using it for yet, which is we're not incorporating AI into our workflows, at least not yet. So we're not building agents that automate our environmental reviews or transform the way we operate. We may go there and we can discuss that later, but right now we're really using generative AI as a tool and still trying to figure out how to make it useful and get value from it. And primarily we're using it for research and to a lesser degree, writing. We find that it's really great for getting information about industries, contaminants, regulations. I'll give you a few examples. For regulatory questions. We find it's really helpful, particularly if you're, in a state that you're not familiar with. It's really helpful to get information about, say, whether or not that state has a leaking underground storage tank fund, whether it has a designated revenue stream, or whether this fund is solvent. All those types of questions. It can really it can get those give you answers very quickly, and then give you the citations and links so that you can confirm what it's telling you. Probably the second area that we use it for research is I find it just really great for questions about industries and chemicals and things like that. And this is kind of where you need to have a lot of humility as an environmental risk manager, because the truth is that none of us are experts on every single industry and every single chemical that has ever been used in the United States. And AI is a great place to start to get a lot of those basic questions answered. And then lastly, I would say, so this is here. I'll give you another one, sort of more unusual place where we've had some success, which is asking AI about specific properties. And in one case, AI was able to point me to websites that never would have been on my radar, and even brought me to reports on the property that were, otherwise wouldn't have been available. And so asking AI about specific properties may be, especially useful if you're a consultant, to put in to practice regularly. I think that would be kind of an interesting thing to experiment with. You might be surprised by the kind of information that AI can get you that you wouldn't have gotten through your regular sources in a typical phase one.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I don't think it's too hard to imagine that we get to a point in the near future where you're using AI to review phase ones. Have you guys explored that at all yet?
A little bit, and to mixed results, and it takes a lot of trial and error. I don't think we're at the point yet where we can just throw a phase one into AI and have it tell us exactly what we need to get from it. But it's getting pretty close. And we have experimented with it, and it's really key to make sure that you have the right prompts and that you know how to prompt things. You can go really far with just prompts and learning how to do prompts well. Just to give you an example of how to do it and how not to, I once early on loaded up a phase one and asked it whether or not the phase one met the ASTM 1527 standards. And it said, yes, it does, because on page 3, it says it meets 1527 standards, right? So that, and that it seems like a ridiculous answer, like this is a dumb machine, but it's actually a very reasonable answer, since I didn't tell exactly what I wanted it to do. And what I would have needed to do, I didn't actually do this, but you would have had to load up the standard into AI, load up the phase one, explain what you're doing, explain what you want it to do, that you want it to go through, and figure out, what are all the requirements of the standard, and then go and match it up with the document. And it can, I'm sure somebody will be able to get it to do that. But we haven't gone quite that far at this point.
Okay. Yeah. Prompts are interesting. I think it's sort of in art form. It's really good to sort of start pretty broad and narrow it down, and AI can do a great job of getting into specifics, but the prompts are really what's going to drive everything. And I know you have a few pretty interesting ones. You want to kind of share how you develop those?
Yeah, sure. I have one that is, I have a few of them, but I have a long version that I use very often. It's like about a page long Word document I have pinned to Word. Keep it open most of the day. And it just tells you, it just explains who I am, environmental risk manager at Fifth Third, and we're interested in environmental issues that are going to cause problems with collateral real estate, and I kind of go through a lot of the issues that we're concerned about. It's also key to say what you're not concerned about. So I have to specify that I'm not interested in climate risk or reputational risks, some of these other risks that it may think I'm talking about. And that goes on, it's kind of wordy, it goes on for a full page. And I'll paste that in and then say, with that background, here's my question. And then I get pretty good responses back. It can give very good, detailed, and targeted answers, which is really helpful. You're not getting a lot of extra words in there. And so, that's a sort of a trial and error thing. I just recommend people just, take a little time and create a really good prompt, kind of what you're interested in, and then kind of just save it somewhere and hold on to it and use it, cut and paste and put it into AI and then ask your question, and then you can get some really great answers from it.
Yeah, that's really a great explanation. So we've covered some prompts, we've covered some lessons learned. How about pitfalls or drawbacks that you guys have experienced so far?
Well, the first thing is probably security. What we're talking about here, like we use Microsoft Copilot, which I think most of my environmental peers at other banks that are using AI, I think, are using Copilot. So that is that's a system that still is uses ChatGPT 5, I believe now, and it does not. You can load up a confidential document, and it doesn't go into some training database somewhere. They have the proper security protocols. I think for most of us, I enjoyed using ChatGPT 3 when I came out here at the bank for about a week, maybe, before IT security, blocked access for everybody. Because it only takes one, someone that's not thinking too clearly to ask the wrong question or upload the wrong document. You got some real problems. So we're talking here about very secure systems for starters. The other pitfall, of course, is that these things, you really shouldn't trust the outputs, at face value. And that's especially important if you're making a credit decision. You can't make a credit decision based on some output that a large language model gives you. You really need to click into all of the links and confirm everything from the information sources that provides. The nice thing though is that if it doesn't do that for you, if it doesn't give you the links, you can put that into your prompt, and then say make sure you put all the key citations and links into your response, and it will do that. But what's nice about it is that it gives you an answer, and it gives you it sends you exactly the right spot in order to check it. It doesn't always get it right though. That's the thing. Like it will make stuff up. It also takes a little while to understand where it tends to make mistakes. Like it's really bad at it's bad at fielding multiple questions at a time. At least some models are. I've found. There's things like that. You kind of get a feel for where it's going to be useful and where it has a high potential for giving you bogus answers. But that just takes a little experience to play with and see how it develops.
Yeah, so I think just exercising caution is kind of a good way to move forward and be aggressive and use it, but know that you got to exercise a little bit of caution while you're doing it.
Yeah, and I'm speaking here, Dave. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm just speaking about specific things to environmental risk management. There's a lot of other pitfalls about AI, and there are a lot of folks that have written about all those issues of things like what do they call it, cognitive atrophy. When you just you just start using that instead of thinking. And there's issues of ethics, which are kind of interesting, and I encourage people to read that kind of stuff, but we're trying to just focus here on the environmental risk management side.
Yeah. Speaking on the environmental risk management side, are you seeing any of the consultants that you work with starting to leverage AI, or are they disclosing it? I guess, what are you seeing from that side of the business?
I've talked to a few of them about it. Most of them say they're using it pretty much the same way we are. This also goes for my environmental peers at other banks, at least the ones I've talked to about it. I think some are not using it. Some have it blocked. But I think most folks are using it more as a tool than anything sort of transformational. It's a really good question though for consultants, is because I think there are a lot of people who are very touchy about using AI. Like, they don't want you to use AI if they're doing a phase one for them. I'm not one of those people. I really don't care if you use AI, as long as there's a human that's checked it and stands behind it. But that's one of those issues that you're going to start seeing in contracts if you haven't already, and some people just aren't comfortable with it yet.
Yeah, and I know we're starting to see even in some of our agreements, asking whether or not we're using AI in any capacity, and I think it's something that as vendors we have to really get a good handle on, and really sort of understand where that question is coming from, right? And what type of AI that they're looking for. But I think that's, maybe an issue that we'll address moving down the road. Sort of in that regard, I mean, where do you see this going the next 5-10 years? What's the next evolution of how you guys are using AI, or AI can be used?
Yeah, it's it's a good question. I mean, right now you're starting to hear a lot about agents. Those are essentially, I may not have this right, but it's essentially you're using generative AI, but it's actually performing tasks for you too. It's not just giving you an output. So you could imagine a system like we use UConnect as our kind of cloud-based appraisal and environmental management system. I could imagine eventually that what would happen is a lender would submit an environmental assessment for us to review. Before it even gets to us, it would get reviewed by an agent, and it would, be able to establish, what's the date of the report, is it done by a consultant that we're comfortable with? Is it done by a consultant that we're not comfortable with? Does it have any environmental concerns listed to it? Does it mention anything about tanks and dry cleaners on this property? You can probably get an agent that's going to go through and pull out all that kind of information, perhaps even create a risk score of some sort. And so all that arrives to you as a risk manager, and you already have quite a bit of information already completed. Then you can start imagining that factoring into policy. So, maybe we get really comfortable with our risk score system. We feel like we have a really good algorithm for it. And we say, hey, if we have a low risk score, and the loan is less than this amount, then maybe we won't look at it. So maybe that frees up some time for us. We'll see where this goes. I think we're a ways off on that. One group to look at first is to see what happens on the appraisal side, because there's usually about like 3 times as many appraisers as there are environmental people. So if you're going to do an AI project and want to get the most bang for the buck, you're probably going to, look at appraisals before you look at environmentals. So in some sense, we might be following their lead on some of this stuff.
Yeah, I think that makes sense too. And I don't know this for certain, but I would imagine AI reviewing an appraisal compared to AI reviewing a phase one report, it could be a little bit more straightforward, right? I mean, the math piece and the narrative, neighborhood descriptions, things like that are probably a little bit easier to get comfortable with, as opposed to calling out a wreck.
Yeah, there's also sort of a difference in the nature of the risk that we're looking at with appraisers, because the appraisal is always an important piece of an underwriting a commercial real estate secured loan. Environmental usually is not a factor in underwriting a commercial real estate loan, except for when it is. And most of the properties are clean. So you can have a bot in theory that could help you kind of screen out those easy projects, and and suddenly those go away, and it looks like you've just gotten rid of half of your volume. Maybe you even get rid of 80% of your volume, but it doesn't mean it gets rid of 80% of your work, because I think most of us would say that the easy ones don't take a lot of time. Where you really get tripped up are the complicated ones, and those can take weeks and months. So you might get rid of a lot of the easier and frankly kind of the less interesting work of the department, but the effect on things like headcount and the amount of work that you actually have to do may not be as great as the numbers might suggest.
Yeah, I mean that's a really great point, and I think it brings up a topic that's on a lot of folks' minds right now, not necessarily just in environmental risk departments, but pretty much any job is being impacted by AI across the country. We're reading about it every day. Are your thoughts that this will have minimal impact for now in terms of job security and headcounts, or what are your feelings there?
Well, if we're just sticking to environmental, I don't see it having a massive impact. I mean, maybe on the margins, but I don't see it having a great impact, at least not anytime soon. Yeah, and same with consultants too. I mean, there's so much stuff that consultants do that you just can't have a bot do. I mean, I could imagine, Dave, like groups like ERIS that, at some point they're not just giving you the database reports when you order a phase one database report and all the historical information, but it also writes a whole bunch of the history for you. And maybe you get to the point where you're training an AI that is really good at reading aerial photos and Sanborn maps and can really put all this stuff together. And that's great. And that would probably save some time and make consultants more efficient. But you still need someone that's going to put it all together. You still need somebody that's going to stand behind it. When there are issues and you have a livid client, they still need a human to talk to. And putting it all together and getting it all shipped out, I mean, there's a lot you can automate, I'm sure. But it's going to be a long time before you're actually sending a humanoid robot out to do a property inspection, for example. So a lot of that more time-consuming stuff is still going to remain there. So I think it's going to be like a lot of these technologies that makes you more efficient, but maybe not. It's probably not taking over whole positions like you may fear.
Yeah, you had a good quote when we were kind of prepping for the call, and I don't want to misstate it, but AI isn't going to replace you, or what was that, Jim?
It's the line that you probably won't be replaced by AI, but if you aren't using AI, you probably will be replaced by somebody who is.
Yeah, I liked that. Yeah, unfortunately, I mean we're kind of up against it. Are there any other thoughts that you have? Any sort of final thoughts or strategies that you want to share?
Well, as much as I like the quote about you probably won't be replaced by AI, but if you aren't using it, you probably will be replaced by somebody who is. I think I'd like to probably be a little more optimistic and a little more positive, and just recommend that people dive in and try it out and get comfortable with it. I kind of look at it as a bit like a language, and that makes me think of a book that came out a couple of years ago by Adam Grant called Hidden Potential. And one of the chestnuts in that book was that kids pick up languages much faster than adults, but it's not because their brains are more plastic and like we were told a few years ago. They pick up languages quickly because they speak more and just make more mistakes. And he profiles people who weren't good at languages in their youth and early adulthood, and then later the light bulb went on and they became polyglots. These are people that could live in a country for 3 or 4 months and become fluent, and they did it by just trying and speaking all the time, almost seeking opportunities to speak and make mistakes. One guy's secret was that he tries to make 250 mistakes every day, and he's picking up a language in 3 or 4 months. So I think that there's a kind of a lesson about learning AI from that, and which is just to start asking questions of it, see what kinds of questions it can answer, And rather than get frustrated by bad answers, choose to find them interesting, make adjustments and try again. And, I think it's fun. And unlike, making a mistake while talking to like a local Parisian in French, you won't suffer any public embarrassment if you make a mistake with AI. So my recommendation is just to dive in and see what it can do for you.
Yeah. Well, Jim, thanks a ton for joining us. I mean, this has been a lot of fun, and thank everyone for listening to the Risky Business Podcast. Jim, once again, thank you, much appreciated.
Dave, I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
To read or to listen to more insight from ERIS, you can visit the info hub at erisinfo.com, which contains featured articles and podcasts and everything about environmental due diligence. Be sure to subscribe to the Risky Business Podcast to be notified of any upcoming episodes. And thanks again for joining in.
This has been Risk E-Business, the podcast for environmental risk professionals. Don't risk missing out on the latest industry news, technologies, or advice. Subscribe now.